I think the reason that AI tends to favor performance marketing, when marketers think about how they're going to use it and that they naturally gravitate towards a lot of times the performance marketing use cases, is because AI loves data, right? So AI loves mass amounts of data, loves to crunch that data, come back with suggestions, come back with recommendations to help apply that data more strategically to your marketing and your advertising. And so for that reason, it's very tempting to say, I'm going to focus on what I would call more of the short-term performance metrics because I have all this data now that I can now crunch and I can access all these signals that maybe I didn't have before that are telling me how things are performing. But the risk that that poses for brand building when we're, as marketers, focused on performance and building the brand is that brand building is the long game. It's about playing the long game. And when you're focused on short-term performance metrics, a lot of times you're missing that larger, broader story around what brand building looks like over time. Because we know that, let's say I put a new campaign in market this month, it's going to take potentially up to 3 years for us to really build that brand visibility and brand recognition that we're looking for. So in a lot of cases, the short-term performance metrics that we can pull from looking at all of our campaign data aren't going to necessarily tell that long game story.
So can AI actually make brand marketing more effective, or is its greatest value still in optimization and efficiency?
I think that brand marketing actually can benefit from AI and is benefiting from AI in a lot of different ways. So the really obvious use cases are the generative AI tools that we are all using to really help scale our creative design and content efforts. I think the less obvious methods that we're looking at are more around how we're using AI to better understand who our audience is. What are the behaviors of that audience? Are there new segments of our audience that we didn't actually know existed before? But now, because of the data that we have access to, we're able to actually have more intelligence about who those different segments might be, those emerging new customers that we didn't realize we had before. So I think that is one of the biggest opportunities, is really using AI to better understand who our audiences are and reading the signals that are coming from those audiences to help us better target and make sure that we're messaging really to the right people.
Katie, let's turn to the content creation side of AI more specifically. As it becomes more easier and cheaper to create content with AI, what becomes the new source of competitive advantage for brands then when that's democratized?
Sure. I think it's authenticity. And the brands who choose to lean into authenticity versus creating more content just because they can, I think are the ones who are going to end up standing out in the long run, right? I think there's that old adage of just because you should, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And I think that that applies to what we're talking about here, which is just because you can create more ads, more content, doesn't necessarily mean that you should. I think it's more about quality over quantity. And so I think that that's going to be really important.
Katie, how should CMOs think about measuring brand impact in a world increasingly driven by AI-powered attribution and performance metrics?
So I think a lot of it is around how do we measure that the experiences that we're creating are meaningful. Being here in Cannes is a perfect example of that. We're here creating experiences. We're here trying to create connection. And there are ways to measure that, but it's not scientific, right? So I think for CMOs, what's going to be really important going forward is that we are focused on everything that can be automated. Great. Let our teams use those tools, automate the things that can be automated, but let's focus on how do we actually create meaningful connection and meaningful experiences with events like this. We do a lot of events at our company. We do a lot of customer events, really looking to bring people together so that they can learn from one another. And I think that the brands who are going to focus on that, on connection, on creating meaningful experiences, I think are going to be the ones who stand out from the rest of the pack.
Katie, with everything accelerating so quickly, it's hard to ask ask you to look forward 5 years, let alone five weeks from now. But going to anyway. So with that, what will distinguish the strongest brands 5 years from now in an environment where every company has access to similar AI tools?
I think this goes back to the less is more conversation of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should put it out there. So there's a difference between creating noise and creating impact. And what we try to do when I work with my team and we're putting out campaigns and we're putting out content is really look at what is the impact of this content? What is the story we're trying to tell? Who are we trying to connect with? It's less about let's put out as much as we can because we now have the tools to do that, and let's focus on how can we actually do better with what we are putting out, leaning into these tools. So I think for brands, it's going to be about don't create noise. There's enough noise in this industry. And how do I actually use tools to my advantage so that we can create things that are more meaningful and more impactful versus creating more noise in the system?